All right. Good afternoon, members.
Good afternoon.
My name is Julius Bamturaki, Department of Literature and Film Studies, Assistant Lecturer and Exams Coordinator. So I'm happy to be the host for today's session. And my job is just simple. I'm here to introduce the speaker for today's session. And it's a big honor for me to do this. I think it's the first time I'm doing it. So our speaker today is Dr. Richard Scott Nokes, a professor of medieval literature at Troy University, Alabama, USA, and the director of the AI Forward Initiative. An expert in digital humanities and e-publishing, he has been awarded grants focusing on AI integration in humanities education. Dr. Nokes leads AI education initiatives, mentors AI-focused interns, and delivers keynote presentations on AI's impact in humanities and education. His work bridges traditional literary scholarship with cutting-edge artificial intelligence applications in academic settings. Dr. Nokes is currently a Fulbright-sponsored visiting professor in the Department of Literature and Film Studies, Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Kyambogo University. In addition to teaching, he will be conducting a research on the topic, pre-modern Ugandan stories, from orature to digital publishing in medieval literature. Today's AI presentation is the first of the 3 staff course presentations he will deliver while here with us in Kyambogo University. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome our today's presenters, Professor Richard Scott Nokes and Jamie Nokes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And so I had to correct you because I realized that when you asked for the biographical data, I just put Richard Scott Nokes instead of a quote, which I am supposed to now call myself. And I'm very sorry for that. I did not mean any disrespect to this name. So before I begin talking about this what we're doing here, when we, I think almost everyone here is from inside the family, right? So not just in the department, but people who are really interested, and we've spoken about this at some length before, but some of you might not know the details about what we're doing. So we're going to do another presentation. This presentation is just for staff. I guess if someone else comes in, it's okay. But in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing one where 3 of our members will also speak about their perspective on this. And we didn't want a situation where, the foreign professor comes and lays out the wisdom in front of the students, and then say, "Oh yes, that's right. Thank you for blessing our faculty, our professors with this." But rather so that they would see that their own teaching instructors also are considering these things deeply as well. So because of that, today, if you want to interrupt at any point with a question, feel free to interrupt anyway, because like I said, this is mostly just family in here today. It's a smaller group, and this is really for us to create a dialogue. So I have something formal planned, but the last part is all demonstration things. So you'll be able to see directly what I'm talking about. Okay, so one other thing that I want to make sure that I do. I was telling Julius that the slides were put together by our AI intern in America. His name is Patrick, and Patrick thinks 2 things about me. Number 1, he thinks my slides are ugly, which is why he gets to put the slides together. And the other thing he seems to think is that I am the greatest man ever to live. And so sometimes on the slides, he will elevate me beyond what I told him to do and push other things aside. So one thing that didn't get really well, please come in. Come join us. Thank you. One element that didn't get emphasized on the slides because of Patrick's overestimation of me is the words Fulbright Scholar are just small in there. I want to be clear. Me coming here at all was funded by the Fulbright Scholars Program, and so half is the research that I'm doing, which I will mention a little bit in here, but only for context, because this is not about my research. And the other was for teaching things. This is one of the 3 things that they wanted me to come teach about. So this is really sponsored by the Fulbright Scholars Program, run by the U.S. State Department, and it's designed to be a kind of educational and cultural exchange. But I think most of the people here know this because you've had many Fulbright scholars from your university go off to other schools around, so you know all about what that is about. So I just want to point out that they did fund this, although Patrick put it really, really small on there. Thank you for your confidence in me, Patrick, and what I'm doing. Okay, so it says up here that I'm the director of Troy University's AI Forward initiative. So let's see if I can make it go to the next slide here. Oh, that's because I'm on the wrong page. All right. Is it showing it normally or no? Oh, no one knows. All right. I hope I'm not showing you the wrong screen, those of you who are watching on Google Meet. All right, so Patrick has a little bit about myself because he wants to make sure that I'm introduced many times. And so I'm a professor of medieval literature at Troy, and I'm also the director of Troy University's AI Forward program, which I'll talk about in a second. And you might think how strange it is that a medieval literature professor is the director of the AI Forward initiative. However, I don't know how it is actually in Uganda, but in America, the medieval and sometimes early modern professors, they're the tech people in the department. And the science fiction professors, they don't know anything. They can't even open their email. They can barely use their phones, right? It's the strange irony of life. And I was drawn into this for a couple of reasons. One reason is that I really began using AI regularly. I don't know, it was before 2019. I'm guessing it was 2017 or 2018, because in 2011, I started a little digital publishing company. Now, in 4 weeks, I think, or anyway, next month, we'll have another series on digital publishing, so I'm not going to talk about that today. Please come in, come join us. So I'm not going to talk about that today. So number one was I was someone who's already been working in sort of technology and education for a decade before the rest of the university learned that AI was there. The other reason was that I had been the president of the faculty senate many times, and I don't know how to describe, you don't have something, it's a kind of like faculty advisory council that's elected by all the teaching instructors will elect someone. And so I had been in that position many times, and they needed someone who, number one, understood technology, and number two, had the trust of the rest of the teaching instructors. Before we go on, I have to clarify something. In American English, when we say faculty, it means teaching instructors. It doesn't mean the collection of departments that a dean is over. I will try to remember to say teaching instructors, but if I keep saying faculty and you're like, why is he saying faculty? It doesn't make any sense. I mean teaching instructors, right? Teaching staff, right? In any case, so I had been meeting with, I knew a lot that was going on with AI before ChatGPT came, and I had been having closed-door meetings with my chairman and my dean, and a little more informally with our senior vice chancellor, which is about the same as your deputy, is it deputy vice chancellor for academic affairs?
Yeah.
Is that the title? Yeah, that would be like our Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, or Provost is what we call that in our system. And meeting with him also. And we've been having closed door meetings where I was saying, this is coming very soon, and we need to be prepared for it. But we knew that until they could see it themselves, our faculty would be very frightened, very suspicious, and so would really struggle with this. And so we waited until suddenly ChatGPT came and made all the AI that only really technical people could use before, made it so any student could use it, and then we began this initiative. And its purpose was to help our faculty, staff, students navigate AI responsibly and effectively. You know, ethical and effective are the two words we use all the time. So we developed kind of policy frameworks for the university. We created faculty resources, an academic integrity guide, AI forward curriculum guide to help our professors think about how do we do our job now that there is AI out there, right? We have faculty training workshops, we've done some keynote addresses and things. And this is what we're going to end up talking about a lot. We've worked to embed AI literacy into core undergraduate curriculum. So what we're doing is a little different than what most universities in America are doing. To be truthful, most universities in America, in their computer science program, in their graduate program, they'll have a class called artificial intelligence or something like that. And they'll put a big sign up, a billboard, saying, hey, we're teaching this class. But the only students who will ever interact with that will be graduate students in computer science. But we're approaching it differently because our view is all of our students are already interacting with AI, no matter what their major is, no matter what level they are. And so instead, we have an orientation class that all students have to take. That introduces them, part of it introduces them to AI ethics. Our freshman composition class teaches them about ethics and how to use and not use AI ethically in writing. And we also have a computer concepts class or leadership class that all students have to take that also hits them again with, here are the ethics, here are the ethical rules, here's what you can do effectively, and here's what would be wrong to do. And so by the time a student has gone from a freshman up, no matter what their major is, if they're a dance major, they'll have 4 classes that address these issues directly. And some majors will have their own classes where they introduce this also. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But the core principle here is that universities, we have to lead on artificial intelligence, not just react to it. I have to say that not just here, not just in my school, I've been to other schools and talked to my colleagues from other countries around the world, and it's the same problem everywhere, which is academics are reacting to AI instead of trying to find ways to lead on it. So we create our initiative to lead on that, and we think we have a pretty good model. It's been extremely effective for us. Not all of it will fit for you. Some of it you will maybe disagree with. Some of it just won't be a good fit at Kyambogo, but I want to tell you a little bit about it. All right, but before we get into that, we have to talk about AI and what it is. So there's a definition up here, and the important part of this is AI can understand our natural language. And that's really important for understanding what's going on with AI. As you can tell, I have a white beard, so I have been in this world a little bit. And the first time I used a computer was before Windows. And in order to use a computer, you had to know the commands. And if you got the command wrong, the computer didn't understand you. And bit by bit, over time, we began to develop software whereby it's easier, you could make a mistake, sometimes it could correct your spelling and guess what you were trying to say to it. The real breakthrough, I think, with AI is not actually about intelligence, but rather about being able to understand what you're saying to it. That someone who doesn't have skills with computers, who doesn't know who doesn't know how to ask for something in particular, with a particular command, or making sure you enter the query in exactly the right way, those kinds of people can get AI to do things for them. As I sometimes say, it's like having a hardworking but not very competent assistant. As we'll see, AI will work hard for you, but it really, as I sometimes say, the artificial part in AI is doing a lot of work because it's not really intelligent at all, right? It's artificially intelligent, not genuinely intelligent, and people get in trouble when they don't think about it the right way. So, it's like having an army of these little student assistants who will work hard for you and work fast, but they don't really understand what they're doing. And so I want one point I want to make here is that it's generative AI, not creative AI. As we're going to see later, creation comes from humans, you and me. Right? It cannot truly create in any real way. All right, so let me check this one. All right, before we go any further, I'm going to mention this several times. Normally I talk about this later, but I thought it might lead to some confusion. One problem is what I call the Ouroboros effect. And this is a long-term issue. I shouldn't say long-term. It's a medium-term issue that we're going to be facing with AI. And so I want to define this because sometimes people who don't know what recursive data is, they don't know what that means. They don't understand it. So the Ouroboros is mythical. It's a snake that's eating its own tail. It's a snake that's eating its own tail. And one problem that you can have, not just with AI, but with any kind of data set, is if it's feeding back on the data that it itself produced, it either becomes frozen and unable to generate something new, or it starts to generate gibberish. So a good example of this would be the Google search engine. Google has put a lot of money and resources into their Gemini AI project. The reason is the Google search engine is broken and hasn't worked properly for about 10 years. Why is it broken? Well, the reason that the Google search engine doesn't work well is very simple. It's when it first started, Google, essentially how it works is it sends out, they're called spiders, basically these little bots that go out, and they look to see who is linked to something. So if it sees my name, it will see, okay, this person linked from his name to this particular page. And essentially, the most links to my name, that's the first thing, that's the first hit on the Google search engine page, right? And that's how that functions. Well, that's great. That was really a revolution. But what happened over a decade was everyone who used Google's search engine, they would just go like, well, I need to find something on Dr. Richard Scott Nokes. And they would click on that, and that would be the first page they would go to. And then when they would link to whatever is on the first set of pages. Even if I'm doing new things and new information's coming out, they're still linking to the same things. And so what happens is the front page of Google becomes frozen, right? So if you want to go to the official website for Kasubi Tombs, good. That's not going to change over time, right? And so that's fine. But when you want to know something that's changed quickly, if you want to know something that's changed quickly, and by quickly I just mean like in weeks, not like in minutes, the Google search engine really struggles, and they've been trying to do things to tweak their algorithm to make it work better. Why am I throwing all this shade on Google? I should, by the way, mention that my son-in-law works for Google as a software engineer. He does not work on the Gemini program, so I'm not giving you any insider information on that. everything we talk about, the things he's allowed to talk about. Well, already in testing we can see this, and it's going to happen more often. What happens when people are using AI to produce things, and then the new AIs are trained on those things? They're going to become, there's going to be more and more of a premium on the actual creativity, because human creativity, because like a snake eating its own tail, like Google just searching essentially through its own search engine again and again and again, and freezing, either AI is going to freeze its answers, or what testing has shown is the answers will become gibberish and not make any sense. So if you hear me refer to the word ORIS or recursive data, it just means AI training on data that it itself put forward, and so that's not great. All right, so in order to understand what we're going to go, we have to understand a little bit about how AI works. Now, if there's anybody here who's in computer sciences, you're about to say like, "You are dumbing this down. How dare you?" Yes, I am. Okay. This is not a time for something much more complicated. But remember, I said the A in AI, the artificial, really means something. It's doing a lot of work there because AI learns from patterns, not understanding. You should never imagine that your AI understands anything really. Right? It is not truly intelligent. And so an example, I didn't make this up, an example that you often see is teaching a child a language by showing them millions of examples, but the child doesn't understand the reading, doesn't understand the meaning. So if you hold up a picture of a cat, and the child just says cat whenever you do that, but the child never sees a cat. It just thinks that that card is a cat. Then that's the kind of thing that AI is really doing. I had there was an experience I had years ago, so I can't even remember who it was with, about someone trying to teach a child to read, and they used cards with pictures on it to do it, with words on it, and then when the child saw this word that the child knew very well, or they thought they knew very well, in a book, the child couldn't read it. And the teacher said, "You read it all the time off the card." The child said, "Oh, that's the one that has a yellow smudge on it. That's how I know that that's it," right? The child didn't understand anything. It's just like yellow smudge, that's the word I say. So it essentially predicts what should come next based on statistical patterns. It doesn't know what is true. And later on, we're going to talk about hallucination. AIs don't lie, and they don't tell the truth because they're not capable of distinguishing between lies and the truth. They are not truly intelligent, right? And that's important for people who are doing academic work to think about. Actually, let me go back before I get into this. I want to talk about a game show we have in America. It's called Family Feud. Family Feud. And Family Feud is an interesting game show because the way Family Feud works is normally on a game show, they'll ask you for some trivia. They'll say, what's the highest mountain in Eritrea or something, right? And then you try to know the answer to this, right? Or they'll give you a puzzle and you try to solve the puzzle or something. But that's not how Family Feud works. The way Family Feud works is they poll people and they say, what might be something, they'll ask a question of people and they'll say like, what might be something that you would find in a classroom at Kyambogo University? And they poll 100 people, and then they rank the answers by how many people answered it, right? So if it says chalkboard, 45% said chalkboard, and 32% said instructor, and so forth and so on. And the way the game works is you have to guess what the most common answer is. You have to guess what the most common answer is, rather than know some deep knowledge. And so it's a game where if you are creative, you will lose. You want to be the most average, boring, uncreative person that you can be in order to win Family Feud. Actually, because it's family teams, you have to be from the most average, boring, uncreative family that you can be. As I often say to my students, if your family were to go on Family Feud and win, you should immediately all be ashamed and then go marry the strangest people you can imagine so that you can change your change your family dynamic into something a little more creative than your very, very boring family. Why do I mention this game show? Because in order to talk to you like a human, AI has to essentially try to be the most average, boring human it can be, right? And this is why it struggles with creativity. I'm going to say it's trying. It's not trying anything. It's just math. It doesn't have a will, right? But it's designed to be as average and boring as possible. As we're going to see later, that affects the way that it works. So as we'll see later, this is helpful for some things academically, but is a real problem for other things that we're doing academically as well. Before we get into the details, I'm going to leave you guys a chance to ask any questions about this before we get into some trouble with this. Anyone have any questions about like essentially the rough of how AI works? All right, you have no questions because my explanations have been so complete and brilliant. There's nothing more to be said on the subject ever again by anyone. All right, now we're going to get into some of the trouble. And the trouble, this is trouble everywhere in the world, but is going to be especially trouble here. So, first of all, it's trained on data. It's trained on data, okay? And so there's something called Common Crawl, which is essentially basically a picture of a snapshot of the internet, in essence. And that makes up over 80% of GPT-3's training data. So this is just what's out there on the internet. It can only train on what it can see. And it can only see what's on the internet, or stuff that is separately trained on. Well, immediately, you can start to see issues with what kind of average person the AI is trying to be. Because what's on the internet are the web pages of countries where people can post on the internet, and cultures where people can. So there will be organizations and communities around the world that are simply either more technologically privileged or simply just more technologically interested. And they will be very represented in this data. But it doesn't know anything that's not on the internet, so those things are underrepresented. Right? So there might be a lot of interesting things here at Kyambogo University that are going on at Kyambogo University, but if it doesn't appear on the internet, it's invisible to AI. And so not just researchers elsewhere in the world, but people here at Kyambogo, as far as AI knows, that doesn't exist. Right? And so things are accidentally hidden just because of this kind of natural, I'm going to use the word bias here. This is a kind of natural bias. It's not caused by prejudice. It's just caused by what's available, right? You train on what you can, and that's what they have. Now, there's a little technical language in here. I'm gonna read it, and then I'm gonna talk about what that means in a second. So GPT-2's tokenizer requires up to 15% more tokens for some non-Western language. You guys are like, I don't know what that means. What's a token? What are you talking about? I don't know what any of this stuff means. Here's what it means. It means in order to process something, the main language is English. In order to process something in non-Western languages, it's going to take 15% essentially more processing power. It's going to take 15% longer. It's going to be 15% harder. Now, you might not notice the 15% immediately, right, in your day-to-day use, but over time, that adds up. It adds up. It also means that things are not being represented in the knowledge, in essence, that the AI has. And by the way, I say non-Western. The truth is, like, even like German, it's about 5 times more tokens than English. So you might think, well, German, that's a European language. They're really rich. They're trying to, even that, it'll take 5 times more processing power to do this because of how much it has to think about it, in essence. And if you've tried to communicate with an AI in a non-Western language, you might have noticed sometimes they cannot at all. Sometimes they can, but they're really like, they don't do a good job, right? They don't understand things, they get no subtlety, they get things wrong all the time. And so it's important to know that most of the large AI systems were built on predominantly English, Western cultural sources. I will tell you that we'll talk in a little bit about like other countries trying to do this, or regions trying to do this, make their own national AIs. Even those, they're trying to train them on local data, but the base algorithmic functions started with English as the training. All right, so what does this mean for Kyambogo? AI is not trained under context. Uganda, Bunyoro, Acholi, these oral traditions, these are absent from your training data. So like the kinds of research I'm doing, which I'm not gonna talk a lot about here, like I'm going out and I'm going to collect these oral stories that are either currently just oral or are sitting in archives that have fallen out of print and don't exist online. If we can put those online, then essentially they become visible again, right? In the same way that if a book falls out of print and the library's last copy disappears, maybe that book exists somewhere, but it's invisible to you, right? And that's something important to know. Any kind of local history, current events, community knowledge, AI is not just going to get those wrong, it's going to be confident about it. Because as far as it knows, that didn't happen because it has no knowledge of it, right? Now, there are some emerging tools for African languages, but those are not very consistent. They're still very new. The coverage isn't great. And so local knowledge, field work, community engagement, this kind of thing can't be outsourced to AI. So the truth is, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is how to deal with students who are being academically dishonest using AI, but we're also going to talk about how, as teaching staff and researchers, we can use AI to augment our research. But the stuff that can never be augmented by AI is the real cutting edge stuff that you're doing. When you're going out into the world, you're bringing something that's either been lost or hasn't been known, or just is barely known. Like there's only 6 other people in the world who know what you know about. And this is going to be something that you need to, and AI doesn't know those, so it will confidently say something that's not true. I will tell you, like a year ago, I was really interested in putting together, so it's very hard to get Uganda, language instruction books in the United States. It's almost impossible. And other languages, forget it, not possible, right? Just, they're out of print, or they don't exist. But I thought, okay, maybe I can put together something. So maybe I can put together my own vocabulary list. And so I forget which AI I used. I can't remember which framework I used. Although I used 2 of them and neither of them worked well. I was like, create for me what we call a grouped frequency word list of the top 100 vocabulary words. And so, it'll say like the number 1 common word in Uganda is such and such, and the number 2 is this. And the first 100 words, because, actually I had 200 words, because usually if you can use the 200 most commonly used terms in a language, even though your grammar might be terrible, people generally, you basically can survive, right? As soon as I saw this, I still, I don't really know Uganda at all, so don't try me on this. But immediately, like the first 10, I'm like, there's no way that these are the most commonly used words in Uganda. Because normally the most commonly used words are things like I, place and building, these kind of very general words, and they were very, very specific words. But there is no way this is right. Why did it give me the wrong information? It gave me the wrong information because it didn't know better. It was on what it had access to. Okay, now one thing which I have a concern about, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on today, but this is something I'm very concerned about, is on the one hand, we have these AI models that are monolithic, right? They're monolithic, and they're supposed to be the most average human in the world, right? And even as they try to add more languages and things, they're still trying to be like the basic average human. Well, a lot of countries, especially wealthy countries, and then regions, are trying to make their own AI systems, right? Some of them because they want their cultures represented, so they want an AI that's more trained locally. Others because they don't like the fact that the people in their country can get access to information. It's harder for them to control access to information if it's coming from an AI rather than a specific site. And so they're trying to keep information away from their citizens or privilege other information. China's DeepSeek is an example of that. Russia's working on something called GigaChat. The EU's got a big initiative. India's trying to develop one, their own AIs. So nations see this problem. They're saying, well, we need to be represented in our own AI in some way. But this, of course, can create another problem of balkanization, where what we do as academics is what we're trying to do in our fields is generally something that reaches across international and cultural boundaries. Well, what I know, let's imagine 15 years in the future and we have these kind of balkanized AI systems. If I'm in Uganda, there's information about the rest of the world that will be invisible to me, right? And if I'm in Europe, I'll have a different set of information. If I'm in India, I'll have a different set of information. And often, what this is going to mean is that expertise is going to also be cordoned off. And so we have these two poles. One is toward a kind of bland AI for all that really looks like a Western European or American progressive. And the other one is AIs that don't really talk to one another. There are ways called federated systems, which I'm not going to talk about right now, but that don't really talk to one another, where all information is siloed completely. And both of those, for academics, those are a big concern. Right now, these things are not having a deep effect. They are in China particularly, but outside of there, not really. But I think we can sort of see this as an issue that we have to be aware of and think about. All right. So what's AI good at and bad at? We're academics and we have to think about this. All right, so it's good at producing natural sounding language from prompts. That is good. You can ask it something, it will produce something in a language that sounds natural. Now, after a while, you can begin to tell, well, we'll come back to that in a second. It's also good at summarizing large volumes of text. Notice how much the word language is coming up at this, right? It's good at summarizing large volumes of text. This can be good or it can be bad. It can be a way of not interacting with some kind of text that you should. It could also be a way of dealing with large quantities of text that would take you, months to deal with. You can deal with in seconds. It can generate options. It can generate variations. It can even generate first drafts. We don't really. I'll maybe talk later on about why I don't really recommend that use. What it's really good at is what I call scut work. Indexing, visualizing things, examining large data sets, formatting things. The kind of boring work where, sometimes there's some kinds of academic work that require us to stroke our chins and think very deeply about our area of expertise. And some kinds of academic work is going through a document in great detail to make sure that we have all of our citations properly done. What I call talking monkey work. Like, we could get a talking monkey to do that work if we could train a talking monkey to do that. Well, because you're not using your advanced degrees in your knowledge, you're just getting it to do kind of the boring, tedious work there. That's the kind of thing it's very good at for us. And also explaining concepts in plain language. I will say one of the things I end up using AI for a lot in my own classes is sometimes I need to explain a concept to students. And this is a concept that I've had whole classes on, like entire graduate seminars on a concept. And now I have to explain it to some first-year students in 2 sentences. And it's very, it's really hard to do that. I find it's very, very good at taking a very complicated concept and saying, just give me, for a first-year student, what's a good explanation? And it's pretty good at doing that in that direction. I often say it's good at dumbing things down, but it's bad at smartening things up, right? And so, but dumbing things down is sometimes important, right? It can help us teach difficult concepts and scaffold up from an easy version until a student can get to a more complicated version. All right, what's it bad at? Well, genuine reasoning. It simulates reasoning, it doesn't actually reason. And you'll hear all this stuff about machine learning. The truth is, that is an area that is wildly overhyped. Now, someday will they be able to learn properly? My view is probably not. But certainly, the kind of fear that they're thinking today, they don't think. They don't know. They don't actually reason. Creativity beyond recombination of existing patterns. So they don't actually create, they just take existing patterns and they move the pieces around. So today, this morning, I was looking at a website having to do with tourism in Uganda. And someone asked a question. And one of the commenters answered the question. It was a long answer. And immediately, I knew it was not just produced by AI, it was produced by OpenAI, probably either Copilot or ChatGPT. How did I know even which particular one it was? Because it uses specific combinations of patterns of words. I was like, this is not written by a human. I could tell immediately that it was not. The grammar was right. The spelling was right. The words are words we would use, but it keeps using the same patterns over and over again. It's bad at factual accuracy, especially for specific local or recent information. What do I mean by that? Well, like I said, it doesn't know truth from falsehood. It can only tell you what it knows, and it will tell you with great confidence. Right? It will tell you something with great confidence. And so if you want to know, if you want to know what time does the KFC open up near me, it's pretty good at that, because that doesn't change much, right? But if you want to know, there's a Martyrs Day celebration, what time does it begin? It's probably not going to know that. It might tell you a time, but it'll be telling you what time it did 3 years ago when your last data was entered into there, right? Yeah, so hallucination, and this is a term which we're going to talk about a little bit here. Hallucination is what we call this, because AI doesn't lie to you, it doesn't tell you the truth, it doesn't know the distinction. And so we often talk about it hallucinating. I actually don't like the term hallucination because it makes it seem like it has some sort of reason and then suddenly its reason falls apart. But that's the term of art that is being used. And so instead, it doesn't know the difference between what is true and sounds plausible. So one test that I will do whenever a new AI product comes out, I ask it for a bibliography of my publications. Say, tell me publications by Richard Scott Nokes, give me the fullest bibliography you can. And they are about 70% correct and about 30% wrong. But when they're wrong, it'll say, he wrote this book. And I didn't write that book, but it's a real book written by a colleague of mine. It's the kind of thing I would write. I just happened to not write that book. Somebody else did. Or we'll have a book and a title and then a publisher. That publisher didn't publish that book. A different publisher did. That publisher does publish that kind of book, but that publisher didn't do that. Now, as time has gone on, they've gotten a little bit better at that, but instead, they will just hide information if it's not sure. So it used to be it would give me a long list of things, 30% of which are wrong, 70% of which are right. Now, more and more AIs will give me like, he wrote these 2 articles, and they're accurate, but everything else I wrote, it's not sure, so it's not going to tell me anything, right? And so this is the kind of thing that I will sometimes do. And I do recommend this if you're using an AI and you're not certain about like how good it is at having recent information. Ask about something that you know the answer to for sure, right? Like about, in my case, it's about myself. I have a very, very, very big footprint online. Like if you search for me, you'll find page after page after page of things I've written, things written about me, etc. Right? And yet, even with all that, it gets me wrong constantly. So this is a problem we call hallucination. And so because hallucination is what's plausible, errors look right. When it's wrong, it looks like it's right. And so this is one thing that for us, as content area experts, as researchers and academics, we know what the truth is about some things. You're a first-year student, you don't know anything, right? And so they're going to be misled if they're relying on these. And so this is one thing we're going to talk about a little later on, which is part of our first principles. We'll talk about this in a second. The human is always responsible for the final output. AIs are artificially intelligent. They're not moral agents. They have no moral agency. So the person responsible is always the human. And so to this end, we've produced at my university a bunch of ethical guidelines. I'm not going to do all the ethical guidelines here because there's a lot. And they're slightly different for different fields, what they want to do. But they're based on 2 core principles. I do want to strongly urge you to accept these core principles. The first one is something I say constantly. I say it all the time. The robot should serve the human. The human should never serve the robot. Whatever is in our ethics, the human must always be first. That is central. And I know that Kyambogo University will be very friendly to this idea because I said this phrase to Julius Bamaturaki a couple days ago, and about 30 seconds after I said this phrase, your deputy, what's it called? Deputy Vice Chancellor? Yeah. Deputy Vice Chancellor said, the technology should serve the human should never serve the technology. She said exactly the same thing, except the word technology swapped out. So I know at your various high levels, you share this idea that everything must always be human-centered. So I'm pretty confident that you guys will agree with me on that one. And the second one is what I just said. The human is always responsible for the final product. Right, so one of the things is if you have one of the handouts, in the back of the handout, they're kind of rubrics we use in creative writing. And one thing you'll notice is if you have even one wrong, hallucinated citation or fact or something, the human cannot say, well, the AI gave that to me. Well, the AI gave you an F then. That's a failing grade. Because you're the human, you have agency. The AI has no agency. It works for you. You are responsible. Right? And so this is really central to what we both for students, coming up with ethical codes for students, and also for researchers, right? How we think about how we interact with AI. That whatever it gives us, once we put that out in the world, it better be right. Or you, the human, are obeying the robot. The robot said, write this. You said, yes, sir. I'll obey you, robot. Now the human is serving the robot. So it's both unethical in the sense of academic dishonesty. It's also an ethical problem because you are putting yourself lower than the AI. Institutions who build policy, and this is, I know, will be very controversial here. I know that this is a little delicate, so I'm just going to tell you what we're doing. But we feel that institutions that build policy around what an AI detector can measure, that's, again, serving the robot rather than serving the human. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as a problem later on. And this also applies the other way. If you refuse assignments, refuse all engagement, period, this leaves students having to figure it out alone. Our students are going to enter into a world in which everyone else is using artificial intelligence, and they will too. Well, who's going to teach them how to use it ethically and effectively? That's going to be these people here, or nobody. And I really don't want to live in a world where nobody is teaching me this. And by the way, I will say that our students at my university are really aware of this. So I told you, we created these four classes that all students who start out in the university will have to take. And when we did that, a group of senior students, so that would be fourth-year students, a group of fourth-year students came to me, and they were angry. And they said, this is not fair. Why next year are incoming first-year students going to get training? I'm going on the job market in 6 months. Why do I have no training? I'm supposed to go out there with no training? And they were aware of that, so we ended up at my school, we ended up creating what we called the AI teaching core, and we actually trained students who were interested in how to teach other students, and then we sent them out to teach second, third, and fourth-year students the principles that the incoming students were going to be getting. But the point of that is not that you have to do something like that. The point of that is your students are aware that they're going into this world, and if they're not trained by you, they're going to get trained by nobody, which is not good. All right. So things that we have to worry about on a higher level, and this is, when I'm talking to students, I'm not going to talk about this, but for us as researchers, for us as academics, these are things that we really have to think about. First of all is what's called algorithmic capture. When the AI begins to narrow your thinking rather than expanding it, where you are captured by the AI. When we stop thinking about the way that the AI does not know anything it's not been exposed to, and is only trying to give the most average answer, then we can end up thinking in the same way. Now, truthfully, if you're in a position where you have to do the same task the same way every day with no changing, that's not going to hurt anyone that badly. It's not good to narrow your thinking, to just obey whatever the AI thinks. That's not going to do much. People like us, who are pushing the boundaries of knowledge through our own research and are teaching students things on a higher level and coming up with new knowledge, right? That's a real problem for us. And that doesn't just hurt us as individuals, that hurts humanity, because then now we're stuck in the same kind of Ouroboros recursive data loop that the AI is. Of course, there's hallucinations, right? If it can't distinguish between what's true and what's plausible, people, not just students, but people who rely on it factually will believe things that sound plausible but are false. It'll be that simple. Right? Bias, which we've talked about a little bit, bias is going to be a problem no matter what happens. You cannot train an AI on everything that exists. Certainly, some things you don't want to train it on, right? Like an AI, should not know all of your banking information, for example. If it does know your banking information, please give me the password and log in, because I would like to be a very rich man. There are some things we intentionally don't want it to know. Some things we talk about it doesn't know just naturally because of what it's trained on. Some things we hide from AI for a reason, right? Well, because of what it's hidden from it, it will naturally become biased in those ways. And that gets to privacy, right? And this is an important thing which will lead to some consternation among academics. AIs may train on any data that you enter. You, your students, anything that is put in there, they can train on. So you need to assume that every AI that you have is insecure unless you prove otherwise. So as I often say, if you wouldn't put it on a sign and put it out on the road for people to look at, you should never put it into an AI. Your sensitive student data. You know, I know Kyambogo University has sensitive information. Some of it's sensitive information like the financial dealings of your faculty with the university, of your staff with the university. Some of it are things like, we have this plan for the future and we have to talk, but we are trying to create a new program. We're not sure how the national government will think about that. And so maybe we need to send messages and talk very frankly about this so that we can plan things out in ways that maybe some politician might not want to see, right? So there's all kinds of sensitive data, from things that are just private to things that are not exactly secret, but is best not to put out in the world, right? If you put that data into an AI, you are essentially giving it to the world. And that's important to know. All right, so these are all the principles and things we worry about. What about how do we do this in practice? What are we doing? All right. The first issue I want to deal with shouldn't really be the first issue, but it's the one that everyone's concerned about. That's academic dishonesty. Academic dishonesty. This has been a big problem. And I'm really delighted that I was invited to come here, because I got to tell you, I have been in schools and in entire countries where they just say, okay. I was in one country before I came here. I'm not going to mention on the recording here. When we're not recording later on, if you want to know more information, I'll tell you. But I was in one country at the end of last year where the instructors are not allowed to tell the students that they can't use AI to do their assignments. And so they will say, I've seen this happen, they will say, write an essay, one paragraph about such and such, and every student takes out their phone, and they ask the AI, and every student just copies it by hand across there. Now, of course, for us, that's a violation of the first principle. Now the student is now a slave of the robot, right? The robot says, say this, like, yes, sir, I will write this word for word, what you've said on there. But aside from that, the students learn nothing. It's a big problem. And different schools, I will say different schools in the US are handling this differently. Of course, our schools are much more independent from one another than in most countries. But different countries are handling this better or worse. And so our instinct to treat AI use as just something that is suspect, this makes sense, right? This makes sense. But it conflates the tool with the misuse. It combines the tool with the misuse. All right, so another sign of being a whitebeard here is when I was a graduate student, my graduate school had 2 computer labs for writing. 2 computer labs for writing. One with Apple products and one with Microsoft products, PCs. And every single person who worked in those 2 labs was a graduate student, because no professor would work in those labs, because they said, you should never, ever write anything on a computer. If you don't write it with paper and pen, you've done nothing. You can't learn this way. You can't do anything this way. And yet here we are all these years later, and you're all using WhatsApp right now. Right? You're typing things on a keyboard right now, and you're getting information that way. Is the use of them different? Yes, but even at that time, they're suspicious. They were immediately suspicious. I remember I had one professor who believed that if his name was written on a website somewhere, every single person in the world could track him where he was in real time at every moment. And when we tried to say, like, I'm not going to say his name, we tried to say, sir, that's simply not how it works. For him, it was magic. And he was too scared, right? So you have to think about it. So, you know, it's understandable that we think this, and we're in another era like that. So this is ultimately just a tool for gathering information, generating information, organizing information. And so you have to think about it like a library, database, or search engine, right? And so if you're using AI for certain kinds of things, brainstorming, I don't like brainstorming, I'll talk about that later if you want. Getting feedback, clarifying concepts, and that's not dishonest. That's not dishonest. But if you exchange an AI's thinking for your own, that's both, again, a problem. Now the human is a slave to the robot. But also it's academically dishonest because we're trying to assess your learning. And you're not showing us your learning. You're showing us something you got from somewhere else. Right? And so the problem ultimately is deception and misrepresentation by the only moral agent involved. And that moral agent is the human. Right? The humans are the moral agents. And they're the ones who are either using or misusing the tools. So, for example, look, every serious academic paper depends on research, right? You're reading the work of the scholars who come before you, right? We don't consider research to be a threat to academic integrity. As I sometimes tell my first-year students, if you take a paragraph, if you find an academic article, you take a paragraph, you think, that's smart, and you copy that paragraph and you put it in your paper and you represent it as your own, that's plagiarism. In my school, I don't know here, in my school, you could be kicked out for that. Typically, you would at least fail the course immediately and possibly be suspended for a semester. I don't know if it's similar here.
Similar.
Yeah, similar, yeah. That is plagiarism. But if you take that same paragraph, you copy it, paste it, put quotation marks around it, and put a citation, now it's research. Because you're no longer representing it as your own, you're saying, hey, I found this somewhere, I think this is smart, I'm going to put it in here, and then, of course, that compels you to discuss the thing that you've copied and pasted in there. The difference is, the text is the same, but the difference between getting kicked out and getting praised by your professor for very good research is the difference of a citation, right? It's the difference of the human moral agent. That book or that article has no moral agency, but the student has moral agency. If they're trying to deceive you, or maybe they're not trying to deceive, but they're just being lazy, and they're just not putting their citations in there. Look, there's a point where laziness, there's something called Gray's Law, which is that at some point, incompetence becomes indistinguishable from malice. Right? If you're sloppy and lazy enough, it functions the same way as dishonesty, right? It has to be treated as such. And so when we're thinking about AI, we have to think about this issue, right? It's like, okay, so then what are the appropriate tools to use, ways to use these tools and not use them? And so we talked a little bit about this. So you're spending a lot of energy worrying about this. You are going to have to apply your energy somewhere in dealing with AI. Unless you are, I do have a colleague who literally retired because he didn't want to learn anything new about AI. Right? So if you're 1 year away from retirement, you can just kick the can down the road and ignore this and then leave. But the rest of us are going to have to think about this. And where is our energy better spent? And we, at Troy, we don't think it's spent well on detection and prohibition, but rather on designing assignments where AI output is either insufficient, where the student's own judgment, experience, knowledge, and voice are the important measures of that assignment. We'll we'll talk about this a little bit. I think I'll skip this next part here a little bit. We'll come back to that a little bit in a second here. Oops. Maybe we will, if I can get this to change. Okay. All right, so let me give an example here. So I gathered here at Kyambogo, you will use Turn-In's so-called AI detector often, as a matter of policy, I think, right? At Troy University, our level of use of Turn-In also had AI detection in it. In spring of 2025, we turned it off. We removed it. Even though actually, because of the level we're paying for, we still are paying for that, we just got rid of it. And the problem is that it confuses two different tools. So one is the plagiarism detector, or the originality report. That is transparent. If you see this originality report, you can see in that originality report, like, it'll say 32% of this came from other sources. And then it will show you which lines, which paragraphs, came from which source, right? And so, as I sometimes tell my first year students, if yours comes up 0% on a research paper, you have failed. Because your bibliography, your works cited page, your citation should look like everyone else's citation, right? If it's so different, it doesn't come up. So if they're like, it came up 8%, good, right? If that's on the bibliography, that's good, right? Or you have a block quote from somewhere. Yeah, that's not your original work, but you had quotation marks around it. And we, as the human moral agents, we can see this originality report. It's like, oh my gosh, 24% of this. And then you look at it and go like, oh, this student is not plagiarizing. They're just using too many block quotes or something, right? It's not a dishonesty problem. It's a problem of how they're using it. But their AI detector, it gives you a percentage, but what does that percentage mean? Not only don't you know, Turn-In will not tell you what that means. What I mean by that is not just that particular report, they won't tell you where it came from. I mean, the company itself will not tell you how it generates that report. So you'll see a number, I don't know what that number means. So there's no information there. And so because of this, number one, so it's just a black box. So you, as a moral agent, you can't audit it. We already know that AI makes a lot of mistakes, right? Because it only knows what it knows. And you as the human are supposed to be responsible for the output. Well, now if you say this says that this is 60% AI produced, what does that mean? You can't know because it's just a number to you. And so you can't make an ethical judgment. And you cannot instruct your student about that. You can't say, well, here's the problem. Because you don't know the problem. It's just a number with no meaning attached to it. And this reliability problem is very, very severe. So people worry about false positives a lot. They worry about false positives a lot. But a bigger problem, and Turn-In, is false negatives. So let me give you an example. Just before we turned it in, IT had already, just before we turned off the so-called plagiarism detector, IT told us they were going to do this. Well, I thought, like, I want to see, I know it's not very reliable, but I want to see how reliable it is. And so I had 2 classes that semester where I'd given them assignments that required the use of AI. So I want to be clear, every single assignment had used AI. I didn't count the actual numbers between 150 and 200 assignments. I don't know the actual number. I actually went back to find out. They were all archived, so I don't even know. But let's say more than 150 for sure, probably around 200 assignments. All of them were produced, in part at least, by using AI. Of those 150, it flagged 4. 4. None of them, the one that had the highest confidence rating was 44%. It didn't even get over 50%. Now, to give you what this means statistically, do you know what a magic 8-ball is? Do you have this kind of toy? Magic 8-ball is a little toy where it's just a toy, and you ask it a question, and you shake it up, and it gives you an answer. Statistically speaking, and I'm not exaggerating, if you run the numbers, statistically speaking, asking a magic 8-ball, if it is AI produced, is more effective than Turnitin's tool. I would also add that one of these students did not do her assignment properly, and her essay began with the words, this is why she failed. Her essay began with the words, as a large language model artificial intelligence, I have no opinion on the matter. But what some experts say is, Turnitin, 0%. 0%. And so, aside from other things, we just felt like this is not in any way an effective tool. It's unfair to the students, and it causes us to make judgments that causes us to make, if I had to go by that, if it's our policy, that student who turned in that assignment, I cannot now fail her. Because 0%, clearly she wrote that, right? So you can sort of see the problem we have here with these tools. I know this is your policy, and I'm not trying to cause a fight, so I'm just telling what we've done, what our own testing has shown. Oh, I talked about this already. My apologies. All right. So some of you who are in the social sciences will recognize this. There's something called Bloom's taxonomy, and it's a way of measuring. The level of thought and reasoning that someone's putting into something. Normally, it goes from this way to this way. Patrick, in an attempt to make my ugly sides beautiful, he switched them around. So where it says higher up, it actually means further down. My apologies, Patrick, for throwing you under the bus like that. But yes. All right. So the lowest level is remembering things. AIs are really good at this. They're perfect at this. They remember things great. One thing that I like to do is I play a kind of game which you don't have in Uganda, or if you have it, no one I've asked has heard about this. They're called role-playing games. And over time, a lot of information builds on these games. And when you're running it, I forget, like, what was the name of that person? Who said that? What was the thing? And so I will just keep my notes in AI, and then I can ask an AI, what was the name of the person who did such and such? And it can go through and find something, remember something I could not remember from 8 months ago, right? Very, very good at that. Because it doesn't have to really reason. It just has to understand what you're asking it and give you the answer, right? Understand. Well, okay. It can understand what you're saying. It can paraphrase. It can explain concepts. It can give examples. So if you're asking a student to remember something, in the age of AI, any assessment, any assignment you give them that says, hey, give me this from memory, you need to do it in a way that they can't have access to any technology at all, because AI is good at that. Understanding, also, you need to sort of change the way that you assess things to say, well, understanding, that's on the human. It can really replicate understanding really well. Applying knowledge. Now, it's getting a little bit less good at this. It can simulate application, but it struggles with authentic real-world context. Okay. So let me give you an example of this. In order to research here in Uganda, the national government requires that I have a COVID-19 and an Ebola mitigation policy, right? My PhD in medieval literature did not prepare me to develop an Ebola mitigation policy, right? So what I had to do was I started by looking at a bunch of different mitigation policies, and I'm like, none of these apply, or they don't make sense. And so essentially what I had to do was say to an AI, look at these policies, try to come up with a policy that makes sense. And what did it do? It remembered all the existing policies. It pretty much understood them, and it made a policy for me. a policy that would work generally, but didn't actually apply in my setting. So I had to take that information and say, like, okay, but I have to change it because this is how it's going to work where I am with what I'm doing. I cannot apply it that way. It could not apply it specifically, but it got pretty close. Analyze. This is where we start to get to where you need humans, period. Right? It can analyze large sets of, compare and contrast large sets of data, but humans need to reason them. So for example, I had to do a report for, a government agency in America for my university. And I had to look through these spreadsheets of employment data going back 6 years, employment data, for all the different counties in my state. That thick. Tiny, tiny print on spreadsheets. Now, what I did was, I got an AI to analyze that data and compare the data sets and pull out the data for me very quickly. It did that in just a minute, really. But that information it gave me was not useful yet. I then had to say, like, I need to look at this specific data, and then I analyzed the numbers it gave me. It gave me the numbers, it crunched all these spreadsheets together, it crunched them all together, but I had to analyze them. I had to say, like, well, what is the actual concern here? What do we need them for? Evaluation. Look, this is just for humans. This is the judgment calls, ethical appraisal, right? The more you assign you give assignments like this, the less AI can do anything that appears functionally human. It'll give you something, but it will not have a kind of real world analysis to it, right? Real world evaluation to it. And then finally, create. Like I pointed out before, like, it generates. It cannot truly create. And so whenever you want to do something creative, you need a human to do that. Right now, Silicon Valley, the tech center of the United States, is contracting in terms of the jobs. It's harder and harder to hold on to jobs. Every time there's a new contraction, my daughter works for a company called LinkedIn. Her husband works for a company called Google. Every time there's a contraction, we're waiting to see, are they getting fired in this round so far? So far, we've been blessed. They still have jobs, right? But every time, we're like, are they getting fired this time? And so hardly anyone can get a job. It's just people holding on to their jobs, except the hottest new job is writers. That's the hottest new job in Silicon Valley now. They need writers. Why? Because they need people to create text, because if you rely on the AI to produce text, it's just going to generate the same thing over and over again. And so this creativity is important. So when you look at this and you think about how to assess students, they're going to go into a world where remembering and understanding is something which mostly they're going to use AI for. In the same way that when literacy came around, people's memories got worse. If I am very literate, I'm an English professor, if I have to go to the store, to grocery store, to buy more than 2 items, if I have 3 items, I need a list or I will forget. And this woman here can attest to that. Right? My memory is completely outsourced to my writing, to books, to notes, to things like this, right? My memory is completely outsourced. And so, as you're evaluating students, you're thinking about what actual skills they need. They are going to need the higher order skills, right? The analytical, the evaluative, the creative skills. These are the skills that we need to train them in more and more and more, because these other skills are going to be less important to them, and those skills are going to be more and more in demand as people don't do them. They're like, I'll just let an AI decide for me. If you let an AI decide for you, you're now becoming a slave to the robot, right? All right. So that's a lot about, like, my recommendation to you is to think about those higher level skills. What that is depends on your field, right? Like, different fields have different higher level skills. And there are some, by the way, there are some things that you can't outsource. So the example I like to give is, look, if I'm teaching chemistry, first year chemistry, I need those students to actually know the periodic table of elements, right? Like, can they get an AI to tell them, or can they find it in a book? Yeah, they can. But that's a kind of basic knowledge that if they're going to evaluate what comes out of an AI, they need to understand that. They already need to have that. And so when you're assessing for those kinds of things, you need to do it in a way that they cannot use technology to interrupt that, because that's a basic memory thing that they need. But if they don't need that kind of memory, focus then on the higher level skills that they do need to have. All right, what about us? What about research? All right, so AI is pretty good at surveying a field quickly. If you need to come up with a quick bibliography on important works in a subject, AI can do that for you very simply and in a pretty trustworthy way. But the further up you go in knowledge, the more it's a field of expertise where fewer and fewer people know, the less reliable that becomes, right? So this is like for the starting point, right? This is when you think, well, I have to deliver this paper on such and such, and I only know a little bit about it. Where should I start reading? And again, you can't trust AI-generated citation without checking the source directly. It's really bad at that. That's actually a data entry problem. It's interesting. If you try to use, if you try to use not just AI, but you try to use like citation generators, you may have noticed how often they're wrong. It's because a librarian is entering the data, and if the librarian makes a mistake, enters something in the wrong field, that's now a fact forever and ever and ever. And you as the human need to go like, that's not right. Our librarians, this seems right to me, but one of our librarians tested this on our own library systems, which are based on JSTOR, which is a very common, they tested JSTOR first, and then some other big ones, EBSCO, the kind of real big databases, and they found about 30% failure rate, that the citation was wrong in some way. And it's always a data entry problem. Well, an AI doesn't know if it's a data entry problem, so don't trust AI citations. Check it yourself, right? Check it yourself. It can help you find the source, but then you need to not just read the source, but you need to make sure it's cited correctly. Notebook LM is working with your own documents. I'm going to actually demonstrate that for you later on, if we have time. There are AIs like Perplexity that does cite searchable research queries, so if you need to search, Perplexity's pretty good at you. But there are just some things AI cannot do and probably can never do. Archival work, right? Unless someone is taking those archives and entering them into an AI, it takes the human to go into the archives and find that information. Field work. A lot of us are in fields where you've got to go out somewhere and look at something directly or sample it directly or whatever. An AI cannot do this. Even if you imagine an AI robot, right, and say, oh, I'll make a robot, it can go out to that place for me. How does it know really what to sample? It doesn't, because it cannot evaluate like you can. So I'll give you an example. This is not an AI example, but my friend, I won't name him because I want him to continue to get government grants if he needs them. He used to do, he still does work for the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a government agency in America that protects the environment. And one of his jobs early in his career was to go out and collect samples, water samples, from one of the Great Lakes. So we have these lakes that are really big, like Lake Victoria size. We have these lakes, and his job was to go out there and do that. And I can't remember the depth. I think it was like, let's say it was 25 meters. I'm making that up. I can't remember what it was. They had to sample the water from 25 meters down. That was what the policy was. But there were some places that they were sent to sample that the lake was not that deep. Like the sandbar had grown up or something, and they ended up pulling mud. But the policy was, you've got to tell us what's in that sample, and they ended up sampling this mud as if it was water giving what they knew to be garbage information to the federal government, but they said, like, this is not right. And they're like, that's what the policy says, so give us this. Well, they at least, as humans, were able to say, like, look, government, don't be stupid. And AI doesn't know not to be stupid, right? And AI would just, like, do that and give you the data with no, like, hey, this is not good, right? So field work, we definitely need humans. And then, of course, just the judgment that comes from deep disciplinary exercise. Some questions in your field, no one knows the answer for sure, but you, as an expert, who've really thought about this for years, have studied about it for years, you have a judgment. Maybe it's just a gut instinct, but it's going to be better than just something you can get out of an AI. So, if you're using AI for research, you want to disclose AI in your research process. You want to be as transparent as possible. Now, as I'm going to talk about a little bit later, that transparency is becoming harder and harder. Well, I'll just say this now. AI is being embedded in all of the tools that we use. And so being transparent with it is extremely difficult because you often don't know that you're using it. But one thing you can do is, if AI generates a claim, you have to verify that. You as the human are responsible for that. Don't just accept that. And so because of this, AI is a tool for acceleration. It can accelerate your research, it can make it more efficient, but it's not your co-author. Right? The worst graduate assistant you've ever had is a better co-author than a machine with no actual intelligence, no actual understanding of things. Right? The responsibility still lies with you. All right, so I'm coming to the end, and then we'll take some time to talk, and then I'll show you some stuff if you want. So we really need to think about updating our policies. We've really been working on this. We're still in the middle of it in my university, though we've done a lot of things. One thing is, discuss how AI tools are being used in your discipline. So depending on your field, there's often a professional world that's connected with your field. Right? So let's say you're a journalist. You're a journalism professor. Well, guess what? There are professional journalists out there. And so you want to, instead of avoiding the subject, you want to find out, how are working journalists today actually using AI? What are they actually doing? What are the professional expectations? And this is a problem, I have to say, for older instructors. Why? Because we didn't learn this. It wasn't part of the professional field, 6 years ago. So we didn't learn this, and so we kind of have to go out as learners to see what is actually happening. And by the way, this is something you don't just do once, but you have to check in occasionally, because the field is changing very, very fast all the time, everywhere. You need to discuss AI bias and outputs with your class. We've talked about this on a higher level than you're going to be able to do with a first-year student, right? But they need to know these things now. If you don't teach it to them, they're not going to understand it. And how bias functions is going to be different in different fields. Many of you are in different academic fields. How that bias function is going to make a big difference. And you need to discuss that with them and help them to understand that. Now, if you can't, right now it's very difficult in most places, but I found this is very effective for also preventing academic integrity problems. Demonstrate your own competence. Discuss AI in class with them, and if you're telling them this is a way you can use it, if you're in a situation where you can demonstrate it for them, show it to them, do so. Now, obviously, with a large group, it's hard if you don't have data projection, right? But wherever possible, sometimes you just have to talk them through it and walk them through it. Show them that you understand it and that you know it. That stops a lot of academic integrity problems, because the truth is, often they think we're a bunch of idiots, right? Often they think we're a bunch of idiots and we don't know anything, and as soon as you demonstrate that you know more than they do, those who are lazy will just say, I better not, right? One of the reasons that our this meeting is for staff only is because I don't want them to feel like you guys are a bunch of idiots. I want you to be able to take this, adapt it to your own thing, and then be able to demonstrate to your classes, no, I know what I'm talking about. And yeah, I'm learning every day because the field is changing every day, but I know more than you. So you better do what I'm telling you to do, right? Offer assignments where the students assess or improve AI-produced content. So one of the first things I do in a writing class in the United States is I'll take a prompt, and I'll take a prompt usually for the first essay we have, and I'll put it into usually ChatGPT because that's the one they like to use, whatever's popular with them. And I say, write this essay, and it produces an essay in like 15 seconds. And immediately they're like, wow, oh my gosh, that's so good. It sounds so smart. And then I start walking through the essay. I start reading it and critiquing every line. And by the end of the essay, they realize that essay sounded smart, but it actually was really dumb. It was just restating the prompt over and over again in different words and trying to put a structure on it. And he recognized it was really dumb. So guess what I need to not do? Do that and be really dumb. And so one thing, when I do this to my first year students, I will tell you the truth. We've had incredible success with this because we do something. I'm not going to get into the details of what we do because it's specific to writing classes. Those of you who are in the literature department, if you want to ask about that later, we'll talk about that later. They also have to review one another's work, and by the end, they get very scornful when they see AI produced material. Like, this is so stupid. Why would you turn this in? You're going to fail with this. This is obvious nonsense. Because they, over time, have come to see it and come to evaluate it with the kind of eye that I evaluate it with, and then understand it. Okay. I don't know. I'm going to talk about what we do with AI policy statements. I will tell you it's probably going to be different here than it is for my university. At my university, every class can have its own policy statement. It just has to be clearly articulated to the students. Actually, even different assignments can have different policies depending on what you want to assess in. So rather than just banning things that you can't do this, you can't do that, let them know in a statement what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Okay. Include what's acceptable there. Acknowledge that AI is already, and this is the important part, inside Microsoft, Google, and Adobe. So a blanket ban says you cannot use AI. Today is not possible. I want to say that again. Today is not possible. When we opened Google Meet today, we opened Google Meet. And this is, anyone who's online can attest to this, but you've seen it before. Right there on the side is Gemini saying, hey, I'm listening to this, click on this if you also want me to make a transcript of this. We're using AI right now. By the way, if you've ever used Microsoft Outlook as an email, you have been using AI GPT-3 since 2019. What am I talking about? You ever receive an email? At the bottom, it's got like 3 little choices. Yeah, that sounds good. No, let's talk about it later. In a little bubble, you can click on it for a response. In 2019, Microsoft licensed GPT-3, which is the precursor to ChatGPT that you have today. It's been reading your emails and giving you responses since then. Since 2019, when you didn't even know that there was AI. You've been using it for a long time. And now, it's embedded in all of the productivity products you're going to use. So unless your students are going to go out into a world where there's only paper and pen, they don't have phones, they don't have tablets, they don't have computers, they're going to have AI be a part of this world. And so saying you cannot use any application that has AI capabilities, you've just said you cannot get an education. And that's today. Imagine tomorrow. The days when you go to a site to use AI, like I'm going to type in ChatGPT, those days are already disappearing. I've got some I've done for you here. Those are disappearing because they're being integrated into the normal productivity apps that you and your students are using. So we say policies have to be clearly stated in the syllabus. In the US, every class has its own syllabus. It's a paper document at that. For institutional policy, start with the principles before the rules. The good news is, I'm actually pretty confident that you guys agree with the basic principles that we have. So unfortunately, I find that often people want to start with the rules and think about the principles later. You don't want to do that. And so you want to build policy outward from that. And avoid policies that rely on enforcement tools that you can't trust. Your main job is not to be a police officer. Your main job is to train them. And the more and more you find your job is turned into policing your students rather than evaluating them, the more you're being distracted from what you actually should be doing. All right, I'm going to give you a live demo in a minute of some things. So before I do that, I'm going to, because I need to close out this part of the window, I want to open up for questions and discussion and comments, and then I'll do some live demo for you if you'd like. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, thank you. But you still have to evaluate. So you're still ultimately at the center of it. And any use of AI that makes the AI the center, it's not ethical. Oops, sorry, my apologies. It's not ethical, and it's not, frankly, it's not effective. Because they're just math. Like ultimately, all an AI is math. It's just an algorithm running through the paces for you. That's really all it's doing. Yes, sir.
Thank you. We are really getting caught up with very, very interesting dynamics, especially in our work as teachers.
Thank you.
We are really getting very interesting dynamics, especially the onslaught of ChatGPT. The time I was reading the students is writing a proposal, and you see these very, very high-level arguments. Try to connect the arguments, they make sense. And then the question is, has the student constructed this? You see a reference, okay, let me learn from this reference. You find it. How far can a teacher like me, teaching research, supervising research, all of us do supervise research, go beyond what a student has done? Well, at the end of it, when I look at the work, look, you're intelligible, and then I requested, please declare your use or non-use of AI. My query is, how can a research supervisor and advisor go beyond a student, really? Not for purposes of policing, because we already know this is already with us, we cannot do away with it. And the students know how to navigate with these new things. So how can the student try to get above the propensity of the student to use AI, and then position himself or herself with the student, be able to guide him, so that the student doesn't fall prey of excessive use of AI, which I have seen from learning, being able to develop effective analysis skills, and being able to develop maybe an argument of his own beyond AI. I hope my question is clear.
I think I understand it, and if it's the question I think you're asking, that is a very important question for scaffolding the curriculum for students. I mentioned sort of briefly that first-year students, a lot of the work they're doing should be constructed in a way that they can't use AI for that work. Why? If they're going into the world where there's going to be AI, why should they do that? If they don't understand the basics, they cannot evaluate the output of AI. They cannot assess it because they themselves don't have an understanding of the things that they're going to learn. And so, you know, when you have students who have only used it in this kind of ineffective or often dishonest way, they have no knowledge. And because they have no knowledge, then by the time they're a fourth-year student, right, and you're trying to get them, well, evaluate this, they don't have the tools to evaluate it. And so in order, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you don't just flip a switch. It goes from we're going to be not using AI in this class, but I'm going to describe it to you, to you're going to be using it in these limited ways because now you're doing something higher level, to all the way up to by the time you are you're a fourth-year student or even a graduate student. We'll see some tools you can use for that later on. That you're welcome to use it in any ethical way you want, but you're responsible for that output. And if you're, and of course, when you get to the highest levels, if you're just producing something that sounds smart, but it's something everyone has done before, no one wants to read that, right? No one wants to publish that. No one wants to read that, And so you have to scaffold up. You have to start, even 10 years from now, where students are coming in here in a world where there's AI embedded in everything. You're still going to have to start off with we're gonna learn the skills that you need to have on your own. Otherwise, how can you evaluate? How can you exercise your human agency in that way? I don't know, did that respond to the question you were asking?
Yes, almost, yeah, but my question relates to how a teacher can position himself beyond the propensity of the student to use AI and be able to guide this student towards more independent use of the AI tool.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in research,
Mm-hmm.
Developing effective arguments,
Yes.
arguments which make plausible sense,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they are correct in terms of facts, but also not only correct, but also containing the effort of the student,
Mm-hmm.
bearing the effort of the student.
This will depend, so I'm going to give some examples. This is going to depend greatly on your field, right? But partly this is about demonstrating this to the student. So remember how I talked about like analyzing AI output with the student? Not only does this show your mastery, but it really helps them understand these things. So for example, if I ask a student, so in my composition classes, one of the things I tell students is, when I give you a prompt, ask an AI, I don't care which one, to give you 10 possible thesis statements for that essay. And then those 10 thesis statements, don't use those. Why? Because they're the tritest, dumbest, most average, D+, ideas that are out there. Because an AI is trying to be as average as possible, and using it in a kind of negative way like that. As you go further up, and I'm going to show you some tools that you can use now. You can demonstrate the use of these tools yourself. And not only does that tell them how, but you can model this for them. I mean, it's ultimately about us modeling it for them. And what we have found, frankly, is that most of our instructors were not using AI in their own research at all. They were not using it at all. But a lot of them were like, well, I need to model this for my students. And what they found was, in trying to do this to prevent academic dishonesty, not just that, but also then moving on to teach the students the skills, they found that they really became much more effective as researchers themselves. For research, I don't like to use these kind of terms because research is much more complicated, but productivity improved. I don't like talking that way about research because when you're at the cutting edge, when you're learning something new, productivity isn't exactly the right word. But that would be what we would do. I think I will answer your question a bit when I do some.
Just a dialogue and dialogue, you're learning more.
Yeah.
Let's keep that now.
Yes, thank you for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
Mine is a simple one. Yeah, I'm looking at AI today, treating us as being on the table with the food.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Being on a what?
The AI today, the AI outputs are equivalent to us getting a cup of tea on the table.
Mm-hmm.
But we are not in the kitchen. We don't know what is in the kitchen.
Yes.
So what does this mean? Is there a possibility that we can be part of the models to train and dig deeper into AI? I'll give an example. If you have a prompt, define planning. Planning can come with so many words, it's like a description rather than a definition. So how do we get to the kitchen?
So, we're going to have to predict the future a little bit to answer this, right? Because you're asking, in part, the answer to that question is, what can we do in the future, right? In order to get in the kitchen. The problem you're talking about is often called the black box problem, right? Like, why does Turnitin not tell you how it gets that number? Why is it a black box? Well, because Turnitin itself doesn't actually quite, they have algorithmic understanding, but they don't really understand for an individual assignment how it came up with that, right? It itself doesn't know. It sent instructions to the kitchen, but it doesn't actually look at how the kitchen makes every dish, right? So I'm going to make a prediction, and I could be wrong. So this is about the future. You know, the cliche, it's always dangerous to make predictions, especially if they're about the future. It's much easier to make predictions about the past. Though I think we have a historian here, so don't call me on that one either. There was a time in the 1970s where it was not clear. There was this kind of arms race in computing to have the biggest, most powerful computers. And if you watch like old science fiction movies, the powerful countries, they have this unbelievably powerful computer that tells them everything that they need to know. And a lot of countries, especially kind of more authoritarian countries that had money to do so, they really put a lot of resources into creating the biggest, most powerful computing system. But that isn't what won. What won was every human having their own little computer. I would guess that almost everyone here, if not everyone here, carries a little computer around in his or her pocket every day. Some of you multiple ones, right? And that ends up being way more powerful. Every human individually using their own computer, their own personal computer, all the way to their own cell phone, ends up being way more powerful for developing knowledge than one really, 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 really big, massive computer that we pour all of our resources into. So from the 70s, it went from let's have giant computers to the 80s, no, let's give everyone a computer. My suspicion is what's actually going to happen is that instead of having ChatGPT rules the world, instead it's going to be, we'll have a few countries, authoritarian countries, that try to do that because they don't want their citizens to have certain kinds of knowledge. But instead it's going to be billions of tiny AIs, little agents that do little jobs. So let me give you an example of one. So, I guess it's about 2 years ago. I think it was Anthropic. Anyway, an AI company was trying to an AI company was trying to market these agents. They were just offering them to a few people, agents, which agents in this case are like basically like little teeny AI robots. They're not physical, little teeny AI bots that do a job. And so our systems architect and I decided that we were going to try to see what the agents could do. And we were putting it through its paces. You know, we were like trying to get it to do all kinds of interesting things. It could do some things. And at some point we were like, hold on a second. The purpose of these agents isn't for people like us. It's for average people to use. And so we logged back on and pretended to be my mother. My mother, who doesn't know a lot about computers. You know, she's an elderly woman. And my mother, sorry Mom if you see this, my mother, she loves these little Polish pastries. They're called puszkis, that are very hard to spell because they're not spelled with the Latin alphabet we use in English. It's spelled with the kind of Polish alphabet, puszkis. They're only found regionally in parts of the world that have a Polish diaspora. And they're only available just before Lent. So, you know, Lent just began, so I'd say 2 weeks ago my mother probably had some puszkis. She waits for these to come out. They're really great, right? They're delicious. They're very, very sweet. And so, but I know there's no way that my mother could spell puszki, because I cannot spell puszki, and I'm a language expert. So what we did was, we pretended to be my mother, and we made an agent, and we told the agent, we said, I want you to go, it said, I really want one of those little Polish pastries you can have before Lent. Where can I get one? And this was the earlier days of agents, and it showed you what it was doing. And it had to figure out what she meant by those little Polish pastries. It figured that out. And then it started to go into all the local places. It found the nearest place to where my mother lives, and I know her hometown very well because it was the town I grew up in, and I knew that was right. And then it looked at the website for this place, found the particular flavors they had, and it then said, oh, Finger Hut Bakery has such and such and such and such and such. Which one do you want? And we said, this one. And then the agent said, okay, would you like me to call the bakery and ask them to deliver one to you? So we said, sure. And it tried to call the bakery, and the bakery's phone line was set up to not accept calls from bots. So you couldn't do that, right? The point is, this was a tiny little bot that only did one thing. It ordered pastries for my mom, right? And I think what's going to happen is, just like we have little robots that we don't notice all the time, little computers, that instead of there being one big kitchen, that we're going to have little kitchens that we train ourselves. There are things like Llama and OpenClaw and other things where basically you as the user can get this software, and then you train it on what you want it to know. And we'll look at some example of this in a little bit. But you train it on what you can know. And then that way, you're the one who's in the kitchen. I think that is likely to be what's going to happen, rather than these gigantic AIs that run everything. I think it's going to be billions of little AIs that do tiny little dumb jobs over and over again for us, that we call those agents. And that's going to be it. And so you're going to be able to train it and say, this is what you know, this is all you know. And then you'll be in control of the kitchen that way. That's my suspicion as to what will happen.
Thank you very much, Professor Scott, for the wonderful presentation. I just want some clarification. I thought you mentioned that countries are trying to make their own AIs.
Mm-hmm.
And also somewhere there you said that information then can become obsolete.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Information can become outdated.
Yes, for sure.
So my question is, how often do they update these?
It depends.
Particularly given that language patterns change,
Mhm.
language change itself. So because most of the most important use of AI for us is majorly language patterns and so forth. So how can we rely on it and say, okay, this is still good, this is outdated and all that?
So how often they update them varies wildly depending on the actual model that you're using. Some use something called RAG, and I don't want to get into that, but some basically can search the internet right now. And some are, maybe the last time it was updated would have been 4 months ago. So I remember I was trying to get a specific, so you might remember, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? Maybe a year and a half ago, Donald Trump was, someone tried to assassinate him, they shot him, hit him in the ear. I don't know if was this news here?
No.
Okay, yeah, anyway. He got shot in the ear, right? What's that? Yeah, so anyway, he got shot in the ear. And I was trying to find a specific piece of it, and it had happened like a week or two earlier. I was trying to find a specific piece of information about this. I don't even remember what it was. And the AI, I think it was ChatGPT I was using, or maybe Copilot, did not know it had happened yet. Because it hadn't been updated yet. It still had not been updated. I had to use another one called Perplexity, which then knew what had happened. And so one thing that you need to, you want to be aware of the capabilities of the different AI models that you're using. We'll look at some today, but you want to be aware of those. There was a President Truman, who in the late 1940s, I think it was almost assassinated. And because it started TRU, it kept giving me news about President Truman's assassination attempt, which had happened, I don't know, 70 years earlier. So it was a little out of date. But this is something that you do have to concern yourself with, right? Something you have to worry about. And so that means, again, being a critical assessor of the output of an AI, because some are updated more frequently than others. One AI, I do like to use one AI to come up with things for this game I play. And so it's not meant to be smart, right? And this AI, I don't think has been updated in 2 years. So I would never trust it to do anything intellectual. Instead, I ask it to help me come up with descriptions of things and dialogues and things like that. The other thing to concern yourself with, by the way, with this, you might say, like, why do you use this really bad AI? Some AIs try not to use things that are copyrighted information or can get them in trouble with other companies. So some AIs, if you say, it would be something free. What's the I don't know. What would be a very popular movie recently in Uganda? Just tell me any popular movie. I don't care. You guys are like, I don't know. What's a movie?
Battle after battle.
Battle after battle. Okay, battle after battle. Okay. Let's say that you want to say, you might say like, make some AIs, if you say, I want you to write a sequel to Battle After Battle, but this time I want it to end in such and such a way. Some AIs will say no, because it's copywritten information and I don't want to get in trouble with the movie company that made this, right? And so in addition to that, so like, why am I using this dumb AI? Because this dumb AI is jailbroken. It'll give me whatever I want. It'll just give a dumb version of it. And so sometimes I'm like, I need I need something that looks like a Star Wars character or something. They'll say, sure, no problem, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh.
I think let me first ask it. Awesome. So now, thank you so much, bro. So what do you say about the scaremongering out there, that in the next many years, maybe AI and the robots will take over, will replace human beings? What do you say about that?
It's the same thing. I thank you so much for allaying my fears.
Don't worry. In response to this question, I'm going to give you new fears, so go on. Just the new fears will be more realistic.
There's only a little bit of unease.
I'm sorry?
Unease. I'm uneasy still because we are dealing with human beings, human agency. I think we are familiar with the Dolly the sheep. Dolly the sheep. What happened to that sheep? That was
I don't know, but the guy who made Dolly the sheep, he just died like last month, right? Didn't he?
He died, but
And somehow he didn't get cloned.
yeah, but is there any kind of, because you see, you can't control human beings.
Yes.
You're telling us these things are dumb.
They are.
But the people who are developing them are trying to give them as much agency as possible. So we are somewhere in a rabbit hole. And so I'm worried that at the end of it all, we still we're in danger of these things still turning out to be getting agency of sorts. So that is what is bothering me. Is there any kind of policing that is being developed where there are limits? If there are no limits, I don't know.
And also the audience online should also be.
Oh, they have questions too. Okay, yeah. Where's the, we'll do that in a second. Okay, so is there any policing? Yes and no. Is there like some kind of international policing? No, there isn't. Now, there's often policing just because people don't want to get themselves in trouble. So for example, 2 years ago, I think it was, there was a Canadian airline that had an AI chatbot that would chat with people. And it started giving away flights for free. And the Canadian the Canadian airline is like, no, we're not going to honor those. Our AI did it. It wasn't us. And the courts decided, I think correctly, that's your AI. You're responsible. And if you don't want to be responsible for free flights, you should make an AI that cannot give free flights without a human approving it, right? So there's a lot of, so already we're running into people going like, I better not do that. I will say, I've done some, let's say, work with the Air Force. I haven't worked with the Air Force. I've been in meetings and conferences with the Air Force, the United States Air Force. And one thing that we've talked about a lot is that they're very, very hesitant to use AI in certain systems because this is a matter of life or death. Someone could die. And they have just now decided, now I'm dealing with what they told me, someone who's not in the Air Force, has no particular classification, so I can't hear secret information. But I think this is accurate, what I'm telling you. It's what I was told. That now they've decided to allow AIs to help them with the targeting, but the decision to take a shot that could kill someone has to be made by a human because the consequences are too great. So I think the danger of AI getting too much agency is limited because whenever people give AI too much agency, it causes them problems. Now, I'm going to lay that fear to give you a worse one. Because the problem is human beings have agency, and there are a lot of wicked human beings out there. So I know my mother's come up a second time in this. There are no stories about my father today. I don't know why. He's alive. So, hi, Dad. Guess less than a year ago, I started to be concerned because there were con artists, wicked people, were going online, sampling people's voices, and then targeting their older relatives, and using their voice to say, "Oh, Grandma, I'm in trouble. I'm stuck on the side of the road. I need you to send me money for such and such, right?" And so I started to get concerned because I started to see this coming out. It was just starting to happen. And so I knew my parents didn't know much about this. And they're not stupid people, but this is a new world for them. And so I said to my mother, "Hey, listen, this is a thing that can happen." It was less than a week later that my son called his grandmother, was in trouble, and needed money right away. Now, in this case, because I had warned her, she laughed and said, "He has more money than me," and hung up on the bot, and then called him and said, "Hey, listen, this happened." But the problem is not the robots having agency or the AIs having agency. The problem is wicked people having agency. Criminals will use AI to do bad things. Evil state actors will use AI to do bad things. That is not just a future threat. That's going on now. Yeah. And so the problem is not the robot takes control and then goes and bombs the city. The problem is someone who wants to bomb the city but normally would never be able to do that because there's too much targeting information, can now use a bot to develop that targeting information for them and then do it with their human agency. And that is the problem. And so what do we do about that? My view is that we're too early. My view is that the solution to wicked people using AI is decent people using AI, and a lot more using it better. And so when something like that happens, to have decent people, essentially also be knowledgeable and use this to fight against it. Now, there are going to be fights. I have friends in cybersecurity, and there is a war going on internationally every day between a few major powers to control one another's systems. That war is constantly being fought. And so you can't stop fighting. You can't just say, well, we're good now and we have this. No, you still have to continue to protect your systems, right, from hackers. And we still have to protect ourselves against wicked people using AI. Did you say there's somebody who has a question on the...
You've not yet answered whether the robots will take over human beings.
Oh, whether robots will take over human beings? Do you mean whether, sorry, when you ask whether robots take over human beings, do you mean whether they'll take human jobs? Or do you, okay, yes. The answer is yes, they will. However, I believe that as with every other such revolution, they will create more jobs than they take away. So let me give an example. If you look at an office in the 1960s, that office will have a typist pool of people, usually women, who would type, take a letter, then they would type out the letter for whoever it is, right? They would have archivists and researchers who would do things, who would then, whose jobs were called filers. They just filed things. They put things in filing cabinets and took them out of filing cabinets. When the personal computer came around, all those jobs disappeared. I don't think there's a typist anywhere, in a world where there's, that's their job anymore. Right? We no longer pay people just to put things in files and take them out of files. But what happened to all those people? Well, now, because those jobs can be outsourced, but we've already budgeted for this, now we can teach those people to be salespeople, to be et cetera, right? So in fact, when the personal computer came, it eliminated whole swaths of jobs that just don't exist anymore. And yet it created more employment by that same efficiency. of new kinds of jobs. Because those same humans, you know, if your job is to just put things in files, if that's all you can do, you're really a low-skill human, right? Most people, and yes, there are some people who that's probably the best that they can do, okay? There are a few people that's the best they can do. But most people, they've got a genuine human creativity. They've got genuine abilities, yeah. And so those abilities will become marketable in new ways. Do you guys want me to show you to demo some things for you now?
Yes.
All right, I think people, is that okay? Oh, we have a question? Is there a question online? I'm turning around. I guess they don't need to see the back of my head. All right, let me demonstrate some things for you. Now let me just ask, and the camera's not on you, so you guys can be honest. Who here has ever intentionally used an AI? Who here has used an AI even one time?
Yeah.
Okay, so most of you have used AI one time. Who would say you've used an AI one time a week? A couple of you? Every day?
Every day.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so you have some knowledge here. So I'm just gonna look at a couple of different AIs, right? So for example, here's the one probably you're most familiar with, the detestable ChatGPT. It's my least favorite AI, actually. Let me see if I can go into that page there. Okay. And ChatGPT is probably the most flexible of the AIs. It doesn't do anything. There's nothing it does that other AIs don't do a lot better, but it does a little bit of everything, right? So if I say, write a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare, honoring Kyambogo University. If I ask it to write a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare honoring Kyambogo University, it'll quickly produce something, right? It'll produce something that at first you're like, wow, I did that pretty good. But I think those of us who are literature people will start to look at it and go like, well, it looks right-ish, but maybe it wouldn't be Shakespeare's greatest work, right? Yeah.
You guys recite it for us.
Oh yes, please. Thank you. By the way, just out of curiosity, I found out that you guys have a Kyambogo song.
Yes.
I wonder if there are any lines here from the Kyambogo song.
Oh, Kyambogo, I think.
Yes.
Kyambogo is already there.
Yeah. So obviously, it's not creating something new. It's taking from the few things it can find and start putting them together, and everything else is going to be very, very vague, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's okay at writing. It's not great. The AI that I saw, the person put a post about the tourism page. It was ChatGPT because I know what it talks like. And then I can also ask it to make a picture. Right? So take an image of a group of, you better write it out. It might get confused. Kyambogo instructors. What are you guys doing? Dazzling their students with their knowledge. And so ChatGPT also is good at making images. They won't be the greatest images, but they'll be images. It's going to take a second. It takes a bit longer than normal to do that kind of thing. So in some ways, it's the kind of like the market, the general market where no product is very good, but you can find anything there that you need, right? That's the kind of thing. Or you're all waiting in amazement at what might appear here. Who knows what we'll get. I'm very excited. Here we go. Okay, here you are. Look at you. Look at you. You're all, wow, you guys have a Tesla coil in there with a plasma ball. And look at that. Someone's got a beaker in there. Someone's got a computer. There's some construction worker over there on the left here. Yeah, so everybody's pointing.
There's Julius.
Everybody's pointing
Julius
right in this.
standing up there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So here, so it can do pictures. The pictures will be okay, right? This is probably what your students are using. Also, if you've used Copilot, Copilot is literally just ChatGPT with a Microsoft sticker on it, basically. There's a little there. They've done some different things with it. For writing, Claude is probably a little bit better. That's a lot better. Let's see, Claude knows me. It has my name up there. Write a sonnet in the style of Shakespeare. What did I say? Honoring Kyambogo University? I can't remember what I said.
Yes.
I want to give it the same prompt. Okay. By the way, before I do this, notice it says Sonnet 4.4. This actually, Claude is designed to be for writing. And so their models are called like haiku, sonnet. It doesn't just make sonnets or haikus, but they named it after these things because that's what they really want it to be more about writing. So let's see what it will produce for us here. Wow, this is a lot better. Like those of you who are not lit people are going to be like, I don't know, the same thing, but like, upon the hill where Kampala's green slopes rise, where learning's lamp doth burn, tropic. This is just a lot better. Yeah, you could. I mean, will this be the greatest sonnet ever? Would Shakespeare now upset with us? No.
It's missing something.
What is that?
Banda.
Well, there we go. Well, is it?
Sounds of banda.
Well, we can ask it to put banga in there. Right? Right, yeah, we can ask it to do that. But on the other hand, this might take a little bit longer. This one won't even try right now. Sometimes it will try. It makes the dumbest looking images you've ever imagined, right? This one, it's not even going to try today. It says it can't, it actually can. It'll try to do it sometimes, right? Okay. So different AIs will have, different AI tools have different functions in them. I want to show you, because of time and because this is a tool. So one thing, so I'm a literature professor. If you're a senior English major, you would rather cut off your own hand than let an AI or anything else touch your prose. Right? They're very precious about their writing, right? They're very, very precious about their writing. And so the students just, it is not an issue with them, because if they ever turned in something that looked like AI, they would, we would have to call in counselors and therapists to help them. But there's one tool that they all use and they love to use. So I think I am, unfortunately, I just realized I am, am I showing the correct, I'll share this tab. I didn't do this before, I'm sorry. Those of you who are at home, sorry, I didn't share the correct tab with you there. Okay, this is Notebook LM. So if you use Google products, and I notice we're on Google right now, this is something you can use for free. This is what all of my students use. And they love it because it's stupid. This is valuable because it is stupid. So let's say that you want to make a new notebook. I'm going to create a new notebook right here. Now, notice it says create audio and video overviews from websites, upload. It has upload files, websites, drive, copy text, drop your own things in there, PDFs, images, docs, audio, etc. This has basic reasoning, but it is trained on nothing. It knows nothing. It just has very, very basic reasoning. What do I mean by that? Let's say I don't put anything in here. I'm going to close this. See where it says stop typing? Start typing? It won't let me type it. Like I keep, like here we go. I'm going to try to put something in here. Let me see. Let me see. Actually, it's easier to show you. If I ask it something now, it doesn't know. If I ask it something now, it doesn't know anything. I have to put things in there for it to know something. So let me go back out to my other notebooks, ones that I've made. So here's one I make for demonstration purposes. Nokes articles in Troy databases. What I did was I just went into the databases that we have in my university. I downloaded, I forget, like 8 articles. I just downloaded some articles in 5 minutes. And I attached them. On here. So what happens is, over here on the left is sources. You can add sources. So I attached all the articles in there. It didn't know anything before I did that. And so then in the chat, what I can do is I can say, what does Nokes have to say about the Laknunga manuscript? And I can ask it this. You guys are like, so I can ask it this, and you guys are like, I don't know anything about like what that Laknunga manuscript is. It doesn't matter. So it's going to go look through everything I have there, and only what I have there. It will only look through what I've given it. If I tell it to search the web for new sources, if I tell it to search the web for new sources, then it'll let me put the source in there, but it will not automatically put sources in there. Okay? And what it does, by the way, I use this in my research all the time. It'll summarize it, it'll tell me what's there. But notice this little number here, 1, this little number here, 2. 1. This will give me exactly where I say it, or where it is in the article, and so forth. Each one differently, right? Now what I will do is, like, I have a very bad memory. So if I'm doing research and I'm looking at a bunch of different sources, have you ever had this where you're like, where's that quote? What article is that in? But I could say, which PDF and on what page does he discuss CE Wright's work, right? Because right here it talks about CE White. So I'm like, okay, where is that? I want to find that and look at that exactly, because that's what I was looking for. Click on that. Find it for me. It's going slow today, but faster than if I'm flipping through books and materials. Oh, come on. Why are you so slow? Well, normally it's faster than this. It'll do it eventually. Come on. Wow, this is slow today. Yes, finalize it. Thank you. What's that? Could be. Okay, so it tells me which of the PDFs I have it on. There's a reference on page 53, there's a reference on page 54 to summarize that for me, right? It'll tell me those things, right? It'll tell me all those references in there. And so for me, who forgets everything, like I remember, that's not true. I remember everything I read very well. I have no idea where I read it. And you can't do the citation if you can't find the source, right? You can't find the source. I use this as a fast and cheap research assistant for me. Let's talk about hallucination. What if I say, what is a good recipe for matoke? I ask, what's a good recipe for matoke? It's going to check. This will take it a little bit longer. It's like, I don't know. There's nothing in this material. I know nothing. Like, the reason that this one is so useful, and this is back when we were talking about like training your own agents. This is not really training your own agent, but like each notebook only knows what you put in it. And so as a researcher, I use it to keep track of, it can hold up to 50, every notebook can hold up to 50 different things. I can use it to track so many different things. But it's not just that. My students use this all the time. How do they use this? Well, we've been looking, so you put the sources over here, you can add sources over here. You can chat and explore it and ask things and, et cetera here. What about this side? It says studio. What about that? By the way, again, this is free to you. Notebook LL, Google, if you have a Gmail account, if you use YouTube, you can use this right here, right now. It has all these different things: audio, video, slide deck, mind map reports. Which one do I want here? Let's see. So it can create different kinds of reports. One report it can create is study guide. So it's really slow, but I'll see if it can do that. It wants to generate a new one. All right, we'll just take the basic one it has. And so if you look down here, it's currently creating a study guide. Now this would be a very strange course where the thing you're studying, the exam is going to be on 8 random things that you chose that have my name in it on the database. So just to be clear, this is not something you do for a real class, right? But it's generating that report. It might take a little longer because for some reason it's slow today. There we go. Okay. All right, so it creates a study guide here. It creates a short answer quiz, right, with different questions. It creates an answer key with why those answers are correct. It creates potential essay questions, like these are good essay questions you might ask. By the way, if you're like, are the essay questions good? The last time I demonstrated this to a class, I used the previous assignment, and literally the second one it came up with was the one I did word for word. Right?
Wait a minute. This is not your question.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a question put in your database. It is created by AI, right?
It's created by AI from these 8 sources here.
But some of the questions. Oh, I see.
It creates questions. So if I'm a student and I need to study for an exam for a course, I can enter my notes.
Okay.
I can enter any PDFs of the book chapters I have, and I have to study. It will create a study guide for me, so I can think about, okay, what kinds of things might I be asked, right? And a glossary of key terms. And the real powerful thing about the glossary of key terms, the real powerful thing about this is it only takes the key terms based on what's in there. Therefore, it only takes the key terms based on the field that you're studying in. So for example, here's a good example. Leech. Well, what's a leech? Well, you would think a leech is a little like worm that like sucks your blood, and it is that. However, in medieval medical manuscripts, leech is the term that in Old English 1,000 years ago they used for a physician. So notice the only definition it gives is the correct one from these. Whereas if you said to ChatGPT, what's a leech? It'll say, well, obviously it's a little worm-like thing that sucks your blood. Like, what are you, an idiot? Right. But this only knows that, right? And so what my students have started doing is they've started like, if they have to study for an examination, they will take all the materials and put it there in a study guide. Some instructors want to make a study guide for their students. So what do? They would make a study guide from this, and then they'll go through it and they'll change the things that they want changed to focus on what they want to focus on. And 90% of the work they have to help their students study is already done. Right? Now, I would never just give this to a student alone without looking at it, but if you're a student, that's all you have, this is an option for you, right? And like I said, it only knows that. Now, that glossary, I had one student, very sweet young woman, who, her vocabulary was very bad. Her vocabulary is very bad. And so even if she didn't have a study guide, anything that she read, she would upload it to here and just open the glossary. And when she found a word she didn't know, instead of opening the dictionary to find the general definition and find the specific meaning and try to like figure out what does it mean here, she could be like, this is what it means. It can create a glossary for a work that already exists. And so she would use it for that. Yeah. So it's a very powerful tool for students to use. Now, these other two tools I don't find extremely useful. I've had some students who find it useful. Notice there are a bunch of things in here. You make flashcards, it'll quiz you on the materials to help you learn it, right? This is very good for helping you learn. One says audio and one says video. Now if you click those, it'll take about 5 minutes to do an audio or 10 minutes to make a video. So I'm not gonna do that, but instead, I already made them. And I think downloaded them, so they should work. So what if I clicked audio? I'm not sure the folks online will be able to hear this. Let's see.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going way back to the world of Anglo-Saxon medicine. Got a real mix of stuff to dig into today. Academic articles, book reviews, even some blog posts. And our mission is to go beyond just what these folks believed about healing, but to really uncover how that knowledge was recorded, organized, valued, both back then, and get this, even how it's viewed in today's world.
It's an angle that often gets missed. We tend to zoom in on...
Okay, so what it will do is in 5 minutes, it'll create a little like podcast of two people, they're not real people, just two voices, talking about the material. Now I always thought this was fun, but useless. But I had a young woman who she was very athletic and she liked to run every morning. And so what she would do every morning is she would, for one of her classes, she would put it in here, make a podcast, and while she's running, she would listen to it to reinforce what she's learning otherwise, right? Like I said, I didn't find that very useful, but I've had some students find it very useful, and you can imagine circumstances where that might be useful. Video, they'll also make a little video here. Let me see if I can expand this for you. Come on, wake up.
So, we're about to dive into a detective story.
So this one will have one speaker. It'll make infographics. Like I said, I don't find this very useful today, but I can imagine some fields where helping a student visualize the thing is very, very useful. Now this is a bunch of weird, like these 8 articles are disconnected from different things. So this isn't a great example of what it could do, but if you have students who are visual learners,
medical
They have access to a phone.
book of smells.
You could find ways to share it. So right now, right now sharing things like this will be very, very difficult, right? Many students don't have access to these kinds of materials or the kind of infrastructure that they'll need. But more and more do, right? And it will be more and more powerful. So for basic academic work, like we asked about how do we help them. Like one thing is this doesn't learn it for you. This is designed for you to learn it from this. It's designed to take the materials, help you figure out what is really important, help you find the important things as you need them, define the terms. When you look at the essay questions are, you need to think about what's important here, right? The quizzes are, obviously they don't know what your quiz is. There's no quiz in here. It made up a quiz like, well, if I were going to do a quiz, what would be the important things I would ask? And it's useful for that. So this is probably, I would say, the higher end students at my university probably use this daily, constantly, help them put together their research projects, help them go through large amounts of text. Especially it's especially good if you're at a starting point for research. And like I said, this is a tool that's free to use right now. Some of these tools I pay for, this one I don't. So that's the free version you're looking at right there, the one that you could use. Anyway, so I wanted to give you, I kept saying I'll demo some things for you, And I want to give you a sense of the kinds of things that you can do. So let me give you some, let me tell you some other things that you might do that I did. I didn't exactly write this presentation. Actually, Julia saw me not write this presentation. What did I do instead? Well, I've done different versions of this presentation to different audiences at different levels for 2 years, almost 3 years now. I've been doing versions of this. But I wanted to do one that was specifically aimed at the issues that you have. So one thing I said is, AI is it's good for dumbing things down, but it's bad for smartening things up. It's not creative, but it's generative. So what I did was do you remember, Julius, did I do Claude or Perplexity? Do you remember which one I used?
It was Claude.
Okay, I used Claude, I guess. So I used Claude, and I uploaded, I don't know, like a half a dozen different versions of this I've done. So I already produced the material. Like I had already done this a dozen times. I've done this more than a dozen times. And so I was like, okay, I want to do 3 hours. I want to make sure the third one is demo. Like I gave it instructions, and I said, okay, take these materials and put the materials that I already produced, put them in this new form for me. Right? And it did that for me. Right? And then when I got it, I can't remember how much I worked on it in front of you, but then I was like, okay, well, this is pretty good, but this part doesn't work, and I want you to change this. And I used it to take what I already had and put it in a fresh form. It didn't create anything new. It only took what I already had. It's as if I had a graduate assistant who didn't really understand the material super well, but could take what I already did and put it together in a new form. Right? And it saved me a lot of time. So I went through all this, I really worked on it, I made the project that I wanted. Wow. And then what? Well, you all have a handout. I had Patrick, my intern, because he says my things are ugly. I had him rework everything into the PowerPoint presentation. But the handout you have was produced from my notes by an AI. I took the notes for this slideshow, and I put it in AI, and I said, I want you to give this to them in the format that they want, and and then it gave me some stuff, and I was like, no, that's wrong. Fix this, fix that, fix the other thing, and then add our what are they called? Rubric. Add the rubric at the end, and it did all of that. So instead, how long would it have taken me to put that together? I don't know, probably hour, I guess, to put that together for my notes, to make it look good and organize it for you in a way that looks good. But instead, it took me, I don't know, 15 seconds to make the first draft, and probably 10 minutes then to edit it into something which looks good for you. Now again, the human is responsible, right? So I didn't just like, give it to me, print it out, and throw it at you, right? Like I went over it, I looked at it. There were some things I wanted changed. There were definitely some different things I wanted in it. I didn't like some elements, but it was 90% of the way there, and it saved me 90% of my work. That kind of work, if you're trying to get it to make new ideas for you, it will not be as good, because it is never going to be as smart as you. But if you want it to take your big things and make them smaller, or take something you already made and put it in another form, or in this case, a lot of things I made and put them in another form, it can do that for you, and it will save you a lot of time. And so when I was talking about modeling things for students, I want to urge you to try doing these things to make life easier for you. And then don't just do them like, I got something off of my students, right? Instead, tell your students you're doing it, tell them why, tell them what you would do, what you would not do, tell them what they can do for a particular assignment that would be effective, tell them what they would do that would be not effective, tell them what they could do that would be unethical, tell them, and walk them through this, because, you asked the question about humans' jobs, right? And some jobs will be lost. I think way more jobs will be created than are lost. There will be this time of churn where some people will be looking for work. I mean, that's just simply a fact, right? This always happens in any disruption in any kind of industry, and when lots of industries are being disrupted, this is going to be a problem. But as we more efficiently create more and more output, we need humans to actually go like, is this good? Does this make sense? Is this stupid? Is it going to get my company in trouble? Right? Or is it not? And that's really ultimately, imagine all the different things. Like right now, think of all the time you spend trying to do research and you're stuck on the dumb parts of the work and you can't do the smart parts. You want to push the dumb parts onto the machine, onto the robot, and keep the smart parts for the human. The problem with academic dishonesty isn't just it's dishonest, but also they flip it. Right? They take the smart parts and they give it to the robot. And they do the dumb parts themselves, like sitting there in class and pretending like they're paying attention, when they're not. Other questions or things you'd like to see demonstrated? So one of the reasons we don't allow that at my university is we consider publishing another person's work, even a student, we consider that an ethical breach. Now, you might say, but we're using Turnitin. In fact, Turnitin has an entirely internal system. As far as I can tell, Turnitin is the only system that it is not unethical to put a student's paper into. Now, at first, in the early days, the originality report, Turnitin was actually pretty unethical. But they got sued, and they made some changes to the way their system worked to keep everything internal. So it made their originality report not quite as good as it used to be. But so when you're using the so-called plagiarism detector on Turnitin, that's the one tool that's not unethical to use in my view. However, it doesn't work. So it's not unethical to use it, but it doesn't work. As I've told you, it's like over a 90% failure rate. So that's not good on any tool. If you gave me any tool and said this is going to fail 90% of the time, I would not use that tool. So AIs right now are not good at deciding what else was written by AI. They often don't know. And you could try that for yourself. You could go to ChatGPT right now, ask it to produce something for you, copy that, open a new window in ChatGPT, and ask it, did you write this? And sometimes it'll say yes, sometimes it'll say no. But it should say yes 100% of the time, right? But sometimes it'll say yes and sometimes it'll say no, and it, it's not good at figuring that out. So now for finding errors and things, like sometimes there are things you can do. So I would not enter a student's work into one of these things ever. I would enter my own work in. Now, I don't care. So like, why did I enter all of these different speeches and policy points and things? I went ahead and put this in the AI. Why? Because I owned it. I made them, and I intend to make them public. So I'm fine with anyone seeing it. Like, in fact, I traveled to another country to show it to people, right? First I want to talk about that kind of ethical issue. Now, the other issue is about creativity, about what's original work and what is not original. And I think it's important to think about, when do I need a student to be doing something that is original work? And when do I not need them to do something that's original work? And what do I mean by that? If I want a student to cite an essay, maybe how they discuss that essay, I want that to be their original idea. But the citation had better not be original. And it better be the exact same citation as every other person who had cited that essay. The quotes they have had better be word for word the same way that everyone else quotes it, because that's what it said, right? And so when you're assessing it, I think you want to ask those questions. Now, is your concern that students are using this to try to produce work that is not their original idea?
Yeah, they are trying to produce work with ease.
Yeah.
And trying not to spend enough time delving into really being original.
Yes. So some things you can do are to try to create assessments, exams, quizzes, essays, whatever they be, that forces the student to create something new. So there's several ways you can do this, like in journalism, for example, several ways you can do this pretty easily. Number one, things that rely on local knowledge, right? Like, tell them to write about the latest menu changes in the cantina, right? Or the student dining hall. Why would you do that? Well, AI is going to know the answer. It's going to try to answer, but they're going to have to get off of their seats, walk over there, talk to people, look at the menu, right? So sometimes you can ask for local knowledge, and sometimes you can ask it about very recent knowledge, right? So if you want them to create something totally new, that's one thing you will want to do. Another way is to craft the assessment in a way that doesn't let them do things that are trite, cliche, and tired out. So for example, I just gave a creative writing class an assignment. And that assignment was, they had to write an essay not an essay, they had to write a story about someone they know in real life whom they hate, but write it from a perspective that makes that person sympathetic. Now, will some students come in with things that are written by AI? Maybe. But when we start doing the workshop, and we say, well, why do you hate this person? Because there's no real person there, right? They don't really know. So the more you rely on, so if you try to create a creative assessment, relies on local knowledge and recent knowledge, that's harder and harder for AI to do, and it's easier to get the student to do their own thinking and their own work about it. And then you want to critique it. So let me give you one other example here. I know we're running short on time. Let me give you one example of how we do writing in my university. When we're teaching the students how to do writing, every writing assignment has two elements. The first element is the thesis statement and the outline. The thesis statement and the outline. And in my class, if I ask you to write an essay, the thesis statement, and they have to put, for research papers, they have to put the research in the outline with the citation. If I ask them to do that, and so when I ask them to do that, 60% of their grade is the thesis statement in the outline. Then, once they're graded on that, they make changes to that, maybe, and then they are instructed, they then can take that outline and enter it into some kind of AI, and then they get the output. That output sounds like a robot, right? It now is their original idea with their original research, structured in the way that they want it, right? Structured in the way they want it, but now the text sounds like a robot. And so now what their next job is to do is to take that first draft, and that just makes their first draft, edit that until it doesn't just sound like a human, it sounds like that student. It needs to sound like you, and that's another 40% of your grade. The reason 60-40 was chosen is, at that level, we're trying to get them to do their own original research, right? Do their own original research, and come up with their own original thesis statements and structure arguments logically. Like that's what we're trying to do. So that's why it's the main thing. Why 40% for the other one? Because 40% is what you need. If you miss 40%, you fail an assignment. So if you just do that, you turn something that sounds like a robot, and then you get a 0 on the last part, well, you're going to fail the assignment. So what you can do is scaffold it up. So the first part of the assignment is the original idea, right? If they try to go to an AI to get an original idea, by their nature, AI cannot give them original idea because it's trying to be average. It's trying to be the most normal person it can be. And you yourself can just go like I do to my students and say like, especially the beginning students say this, I have data projectors in my classrooms there. I'll just open up an AI and say like, come up with 10 thesis statements for this, and then it generates them. I say, anyone puts any of those thesis statements in this paper, you will fail automatically. Well, AI, guess what it's going to try to produce every time? Those thesis statements. And so it's really going to struggle not to, and in fact, I've never had an AI be able to write an essay once I banned whatever the first 10 thesis statements are. Yeah. So this will depend on your field, what it will take to scaffold it up and to make negatives in that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
But the truth is we are going to have a little bit, for a few years, we are going to have a little bit of a cat and mouse game, where every time we try to come up with something new, and they will try to come up with some way to defeat it. I do think eventually we'll all become so comfortable with it that, students will not try to get away with it because they'll know that they'll get caught. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I guess that's it, right? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some other questions.
Oh, there are questions. Okay, sorry.
Oh, wrong signal.
Is there anything else?
No, we thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your time here. Didn't mean to stand on your Get out of your way. Do you have to say goodbye?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Bob, for that very insightful presentation on AI. I think you allayed much of the fears we have about it, and the interaction I think has been very smart. A couple of things have been highlighted. I'm not going to repeat all of them, but I think what I took most was the statement that AI can actually be effectively and ethically used in education or in academia. And of course, you've also told us about how academics, including I think those ones in Uganda here, have instead of working with AI, overreacted to it. And I think you've advised that we teach our students on how to use it effectively and also ethically, because they're going to work in places where AI will be very much used. And that if we don't do the teaching, then they might struggle on how to use it. So you've given us 4 things on the AI, how it learns from patterns. It is not truly intelligent. It's got some good things, some bad things, and you, I think, warned us to beware of the AI hallucination. And I think a lot many more things said, so I'm not going to repeat them. At this point, I just want to invite the head of department to give closing remarks, and that will be. Thank you so much.
Professor Okot Richard Scott Nokes and wife Namakula Jami. Thank you very much for this informative, enlightening, and edifying presentation on this phenomenon, AI. You have made some demystification of the same and more scares. There are some more scares we have created that we are to live with it. So we must learn it, we must see how we can handle it with even our students. Our colleagues, thank you very much. And our colleagues from other departments, sister departments, in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. And those colleagues online, we had about 20, by the time I stopped counting, about 24 of them online. Thank you very much for giving a good audience to Scott. You all need a clap. Members of the Department of Literature, lecturers, teachers of the Department of Literature, thank you very much for the organization. Today it has been joyous, and because we have a series of this, you have all got this. The program. This was where you see staff closed, it's for staff only. Then where you see the second part, students open, it's for the students. But I think it will also help us to ground ourselves into the same. Because on the second part of it, we will always be, some of us will be on the panel trying to teach and to educate our students together with Scott and with the Okot and Namakula. So thank you very much. Among us we have some professors, associate professor, head of department, geography, thank you very much. And we also had Professor Wabende, and the doctors around. Thank you very much, and all of you, members of staffs in our 6 departments. You have had members of staff, lecturers from 6 departments, the departments that make up the Arts and Humanities, the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. Next is the grand reception of the batch of textbooks. Professor Okot and Madame Namakula, our wife Namakula, wrote to us. I don't know how we are going to do it. They need a very big clap because these were textbooks on our wish list and they brought everything that we needed. So let us arrange them here, and then we have a grand reception of them. And then some photos, because we are going to send back a vote of thanks to the donors. They just donated to us free of charge. So thank you very much. We are pleased that we have you, and I understand, I know we are going to learn much more from you. Members of staff, thank you very much for, thank you very much for being active. Yeah. Thank you.